Welcome to the Philly Prime Podcast and MobTalkSitdown.com. This we're going to talk about the mounting troubles for the Lucchese crime family in New Jersey, specifically the Perna wing. Joining me is my partner in crime, George Anastasia. George, welcome to the show again.
Thank you, Dave.
Crazy couple of months for the Lucchese crime family. Big indictment and charges. 40 people picked up in April, and now a couple of weeks ago, 14 people, including the lone remaining Perna on the street, little Joe Perna. George, what do you make of these troubles for the Lucchese's all across the state of New Jersey now? I mean, there's a lot of guys in jail.
Yeah, I had a guy tell me not that long ago, gambling to the Pernas is like politics to the Kennedys. It's in their blood. I mean, what we're seeing in this latest indictment is the next generation. Little Joe Perna is identified as the financier of the bookmaking operation, but his son, his stepson, his nephew, and it looks like a bunch of their 20-something buddies were all involved in this bookmaking operation that wasn't only in New Jersey. There was I think, Kingston, Rhode Island, and down in Florida. So, this was, according to the feds, a $2 million operation. We'll see how it plays out. At the end of the day, it's another gambling case.
Yeah, but George, the charges here are pretty serious. They're all first-degree crimes. It's racketeering, it's gambling, it's money laundering, and we'll talk about what gambling really means here. Bookmaking is what we're talking about. And what it was, from what they're saying, is little Joe Perna at the top, financier, backer, and then all these other guys are like subcontractors doing bookmaking at every level. Also included is his ex-wife and his wife. We'll get to that a little bit later in the show. But these are serious charges here, especially for a guy like little Joe Perna. He's already done 2 state sentences in New Jersey. This would be his third, and a first-degree crime, that's punishable by 10 to 20 years in prison, and you have to do 85% if you're convicted or you plead guilty to a first-degree crime. That's serious stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the stakes are very high, and it's one of those things where the Pernas are moving targets for the Attorney General's office. These guys, what we're looking at now, if you talk to law enforcement people, their grandfather was allegedly involved in organized crime. Their father was, they are, and now you've got a 4th generation. This is a family, a crime family, but also a blood family that's always been part of the Lucchese operation. And yeah, I mean, little Joe Perna is looking at serious time if all of this plays out the way the government hopes it plays out. At the end of the day, no doubt, we're going to see a lot of pleas and deals worked out. But this never stops. I mean, it reminds me of Tommy Del Giorno back in 1985 said, gambling is the wheel that makes everything go round. That's what it's always been for organized crime. And this is just another example of that. The other thing, Dave, you and I talked about this the other day.
Yeah.
People still talking about the Netflix series we were involved in, Mob War, Philadelphia versus the Mafia. People forget, and it wasn't mentioned in the documentary, that whole Stanford Merino investigation and the planting of the bug in Salvatore Avina's law office began with a gambling investigation on the campus of LaSalle University in Philadelphia.
A student. Yep.
Yeah, a student was in debt, stupidly betting baseball. People tell you should never bet baseball anyway.
Right.
But he's jammed up, and he panics, and his dad takes him to the feds. They put a wire on him, and the first tapes that are made in that investigation are on the campus of LaSalle University, where a mob enforcer is trying to collect, I think, $3,900 from this student, and he's wired for sound. And then it goes from there. And Jimmy Moore said that. Most big racketeering cases begin with a gambling investigation. The question in this case and in the previous case involving Big Joe Perna and John Perna is it going to go beyond gambling? Does it take them anywhere else? Looks to me like this is an economic gambling investigation, and it's got serious jeopardy for some of them, but it doesn't look like it's much more than that.
Yeah, and the interesting hook used by the Attorney General's office here was the key phrase, student athletes, the guys underneath Joe Perna. That's why we're making the analogy with the Stanford Merino case from Mob War, Philadelphia versus the Mafia. That did start, as you just said, with a LaSalle student. These are students or former students, the other 12 or 11 defendants here. One's at Rhode Island, as you suggested, one's in Florida. They mentioned a couple of former athletes from Rutgers University, not trying to besmirch my alma mater there, but having said that, that came up, and that was kind of the hook why everybody covered this case. This got massive headlines and TV coverage 2 weeks ago, and it's still getting coverage here and there. And by the way, Joe Perna, little Joe Perna, is out of jail now. He got out the middle of last week. He was in for about a week, no bail. They argued it, and they let him out of jail. George, this always lends itself to, his whole family's in trouble here. What does he do here? I mean, if you're his defense attorney, this case is pretty strong from what I hear. There's a lot of text messages, there's phone messages, there's payment apps being used here, all kinds of electronic kind of roadmaps to this case. It seems like a pretty solid case that might bring guilty pleas on gambling or bookmaking at the lower level. But when you get to Joe Perna, what happens there?
He's I think the primary target of all of this, and whether he was, I'm going to say an innocent bystander, whether he was merely involved to a degree that his kids were involved and they wanted him to get involved. We don't know the ins and outs of all of this. We'll wait and see all of that. I mean, somebody was telling me that fairly recently, the kids did this and they got the father, little Joe Perna, jammed up as a result of this. Don't know how that's going to play out. If you remember, in Operation Heat, back, 11 years now.
Sure.
His wife was involved in that, and the plea deal that was worked out, she got out from underneath any charges. I don't know if he's got that kind of wiggle room in this one.
Yeah.
The other thing, that this is coming on the heels of the big NBA scandal involving the mob.
Absolutely.
As well. So
again, I think that's why the media came running here, is because
Sure.
they said student athletes,
Yeah, it's all part of the same package, and gambling has always been a big money maker and will continue to be a big money maker. And I think what we're seeing is it's almost like when Prohibition ended, a lot of guys still were involved. A lot of gangsters were still involved in bootleg into the 50s, in fact, into the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
Legalized sports betting is now the law of the land, but these guys are still involved heavily in this operation because it's a big money maker. And in a lot of ways, the legalized sports betting has created almost who cares now? Anybody can bet. What's the difference? You want to bet with me, or you want to bet where you got to go online and use your credit card? I can let you bet on credit. Those kind of things are going on day in and day out, and that's one of the reasons I think this network operated and generated $2 million in bets, because they were part of this world that these young kids are living in now, where betting is, one, legal, acceptable, and two, everybody and anybody. Somebody mentioned this the other day. You're walking around with your cell phone. You got a casino in your pocket with that cell phone, and so all of that's part of what's happening here.
Yeah, and let's clear up the water a little bit. These guys are charged with, it says gambling, but it's bookmaking. They were bookmaking. Right. That's the difference. And you talked about it a little bit right there. Why do you go to a guy or guys like this instead of going to the usual online stuff? Well, when you go with the online groups that are legal, you pay as you go. With these guys, you can use credit. You're not using your dad or your mom's credit card if you're a student. Their Amex doesn't have a bet pop up on it. If you're gambling behind your significant other's back, or you're trying to conceal the amount you're gambling from your significant other, this is a way to do it. In addition, then you get to the whole tax implications here. You win on those apps, it gets reported to the IRS. Sure. You win here, that's up to you to report it. If you get a big win and you don't report it, and then the feds come calling, or the state comes calling, or the IRS comes calling, you got a problem. So it's bookmaking here, and it comes under the general scope of gambling. But these aren't gamblers, these suspects here. They might be gambling, but they're alleged to be, and alleged to be is key here, bookmakers. That's what we're talking about, bookmaking.
Yeah, these are guys that are taking the bets. They're facilitating the operation. It's been, bookmaking has always been an economic generator for organized crime, and probably always will be, for the reasons you just mentioned. You can bet on credit. The corollary to bookmaking is you get somebody deeply in debt, then he's got to borrow money, and you send him to a mob-connected loan shark. Yep. And you're doing that exorbitant, lending rate. So it's all part of that economic package. And I think what we're seeing in this case, two things. One, coming on the heels of the NBA scandal, everybody jumped on it. Number two, what we're seeing in the Lucchese crew in New Jersey is this is the fourth generation. It's amazing when you think about it. It's the fourth generation of Perners being involved. So that's part of their legacy.
Yeah. Interesting, George. Let's talk a little bit about where this came from. At the news conference, the Attorney General, Matt Platkin, and the head of the state police, Colonel Callahan, said that this came from the new Port Investigation Unit. Let me explain what that is. Used to have a waterfront commission that involved New York and New Jersey. Both states, especially New Jersey, opted to get out of that. They got a Supreme Court ruling that said they could. They formed a new port security unit in the state police, and the Port Investigation Unit generated the lead that started this case in January of 2024, according to their news conference. There's Colonel Callahan right there.
Yeah.
The question is, were they doing a background check on somebody applying for a job at the port? Did something come up in another Port Investigation Unit case that they're currently investigating we don't know anything about? Did a lead come up there, and then that pops this loose, and it goes on for 2 years, while that other investigation in April, which took down the rest of the Pernas, was also going on. These were running parallel side by side. Everybody was wondering in April, why didn't little Joe Perna also get hooked up there? He didn't. They executed search warrants at his house, took his phone, his computers, his son's phones, things like that. They got gambling records, bookmaking records when they did that search, that kind of thing. But interesting that this came from the Port Investigation Unit. It started there.
Yeah, I mean, the thing to watch now is what was the origin? Where did somebody get jammed up in a different investigation and give this up? Or was somebody just part of somebody they were looking at and they see him wheeling and dealing with these guys as well? We don't know the answer to that yet, but I mean, it's fascinating the way cases evolve. Sometimes you're looking for it and you're investigating it. Sometimes it falls in your lap. We don't know what the situation was here, but clearly it was generated by a crew of the state police that weren't involved in specific investigating the Pernas. They were that port operation, and they came across this and pursued it. But that's the way things work.
Yeah, it kind of makes me wonder what else were they looking at, because there are rumors floating all over North Jersey and New York that both the feds in Brooklyn, Manhattan, in Jersey, state AG's office are looking into construction projects and things like that in the port. They're looking for corruption in the port now that they don't have this massive waterfront commission. Both sides of the river are trying to look into corruption on the waterfront. Makes you wonder, what else are they looking at and who else is involved? We've heard the Gambinos mentioned up there, the Merino crime family, the Lucchese's, stuff like that. So that's all floating around in the ether right now. And it makes me wonder, was there a bigger, and is there a bigger investigation that this popped from?
Well, I mean, the ports of New Jersey and New York have always been a breeding ground for organized crime. I mean, there was that classic movie from, was it 1954, on the waterfront?
Yes.
Nothing has changed. I mean, fundamentally, what you have is, I think primarily the Gambinos doing Brooklyn and Manhattan, and you've got the Genoveses over here in New Jersey and other organizations doing Elizabeth and Newark. And there's money to be made in all kinds of ways with the port, with the Longshoremen's Union, all of that kind of stuff. Some things never change. You know, we've been here before.
George, let's talk about that taboo topic, cooperation here. We talked about little Joe Perna. He's been charged and gone to jail twice in New Jersey.
Yes.
At the hand of the Attorney General's office. He's looking at first-degree racketeering here, which is 10 to 20 years. He is going to be charged, in this case, as a leader of organized crime because he headed the operation. It's racketeering. It's 10 to 20 years. He's done 2 prior bids. That's a lot of pressure on Joe Perna. Let me say this, from my personal observation, George, I'll talk about you and I talking to Joe Perna last year. From my personal observation, he's just not cut that way, especially when it involves family members and things like that. I got to believe on this situation, if he was proven guilty, he's going to be looking at a lot of jail time. That would get the rumors going. I don't believe those rumors. You and I talked to Joe Perna at the Martin Tassetta case in Ocean County last year. Your observations of little Joe Perna?
Well, I mean, I think they're related to the Tassettas as well. And this is a family within a family, and they're not. I don't think it's in their DNA to cooperate. I don't think it's ever going to happen. You can't. And as I said, we're looking now at the fourth generation of Pernas getting caught up in this kind of stuff. Little Joe Perna is from that old school. He's not giving anybody up. He's not cooperating. The only thing he did, I think, in that Operation Heat was help his wife get out from underneath lesser charges in that case. That was part of the, I'm going to plead guilty, my wife walks. That's understandable, that kind of stuff. But it's not giving anybody up. I don't think it's going to happen. There's, rumors always surface, but I don't see any legitimacy to any of that.
Right. And we've seen absolutely zero evidence that that's going on here.
Yeah.
And I personally can't see it. I do want to talk a little bit about it because I've been catching up with different sources on the case from April, which was indicted in September. And that involved Big Joe Perna, a capo running the New Jersey operation, with Georgie Neck Zappola, a capo also who was rumored to be the next boss of the Lucchese crime family, John Perna, Little Joe Perna's brother, and Wayne Cross, who is a soldier identified by the Attorney General's office in their indictments in the Lucchese crime family. That case is huge, George. I'm hearing about 8 terabytes of evidence now being passed out in discovery by the Attorney General's office. A huge, massive case right here. When you see something that big that started again with gambling, poker, caught up a city councilman in Prospect Park, when you see that kind of stuff, and you brought up the LaSalle kid, these little gambling things open up a big door.
Oh, yeah, and what we're talking about is an age of electronic technology and electronic surveillance, a combination of those two things. I mean, these guys were using high tech in terms of what they were doing, and investigators were able to tap into all of that. And you do generate all kind of information that way. The simplest thing if I were involved, I would only talk to somebody face to face and write things down on paper that I'm going to be able to destroy the paper. Otherwise,
old school.
There's a trail.
Yeah. Old school, George. Come on now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And interesting, I'm being told by my sources that the poker games and things that were alleged in the April charges against the Pernas, Georgie Zappola and them, they were running allegedly illegal poker games. Those poker games, the guys going to that, the undercover guys and the cooperators, were wearing cameras and microphones. So there's video of the poker games in addition to audio. Now, what's that going to show? A poker game going on? Yeah, I guess. I haven't heard anything about fixing those games or anything. They were just running illegal games. But again, that harkens to the NBA case that we were talking about. And that's what makes this sexy for everybody in the media to go chase down. In the NBA case, Chauncey Billups and those guys were supposedly attracting people to these big stake poker games. They were using tables that you could see through the cards, glasses you could do it on, sunglasses, all kinds of stuff like that, trying to cheat the game. And they had insiders also working there. But I am told in the previous case from back in April, they do have video inside these poker games. They do have audio inside the poker games. That'll be pretty entertaining for a jury if they even get that far. But this is a massive case with a ton of discovery.
Yeah, I think we've mentioned this before. There's so many defendants. At the end of the day, if we do ever get to trial, I think a lot of these defendants will end up pleading out. So it won't be a massive case in that. But in terms of the evidence that was gathered and what's going to be shown to the jury, yeah, there's a lot there. Is seeing a poker game, one poker game is like another poker game. I mean, I don't know where that's going to take you. It could be entertaining. I think in the NBA case, you're talking about fixed poker games. There's no allegation that any of these games were fixed. It's just that they were running the games. And as I said in the beginning, gambling is the wheel that makes everything go around. That's what Tommy Dell said that in 1985, and it's still true today. 40 years later.
Okay. George, I can't walk away from Thanksgiving week with bringing up one of our favorite topics, Mr. Merino. Joseph Merino is giving out, he says, 1,000 turkeys this week at his cheesesteak place on South Broad Street in Philadelphia. A little plug there for Joe. He thinks we don't like him. Nobody's ever said that. And at his potential new location in Chichester, is going to give out 500 there. You and I have covered these dating all the way back to 1994, George, when John Stanford was on trial. The verdict came in, and Joey was having his first Christmas party and turkey giveaway. It's Some of the video from that is in Mob Wars, Philadelphia versus the Mafia. Selfish plug for ourselves. I don't have a problem with that. Some of the video from that is in there. What's your thoughts on this in 2025, George?
Well, I mean, it's classic Joey Merino. This is the way he started out, and he's continuing to do that. You know, he'll say he's not involved in the mob anymore, but he still cares about the people. That's what this is about. He's created an image, and this reinforces that image. It's that Robin Hood-esque kind of approach to all of this. And you know, say what you will about it, it's a nice thing to do. And the fact that he's able to do it and he continues to do it says something about his character. There's a lot of negative that can be said about him and has been said about him, but this is a positive, and there's no denying that.
Yeah, raised quite a bit of money to help fund buying the turkeys and the bikes and things like that he gives out. And interestingly, George, they put out a press release to talk about this. And in the press release is, again, mentioned Mob War, Philadelphia versus the Mafia, saying that he was portrayed horrifically in that. I think he was portrayed truthfully based on what happened in court and the charges that he faced. But it was interesting that they used that to kind of promote the turkey giveaway.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's looking for a hook. Everybody's looking for a way to get clicks or to get eyes, to get people to look, and that's a legitimate way to do it. We can argue about his take of what was portrayed in that documentary, but that's a different kind of argument. In terms of using it, fine, go ahead, and it'll just drive more people to watch the documentary, I think.
Yeah, I do too. And George, just to clear up a couple things, he's made a couple of allegations that we didn't say he was acquitted in the case. In fact, I did say he was acquitted. If he cares to look at part 3 and you look around 46 minutes, you'll hear me say the word acquitted. And George, I think you gave a very thorough breakdown of what happened when the jury returned their verdict. So just revisit that for me regarding the drug and murder charges against Joey Merino.
Yeah, I mean, that was part of the big racketeering case, and these were the principal charges. The murder charges and attempted murder charges were either not guilty or not proven. The drug dealing charge was a not guilty. Ronnie Previty was a key witness in that drug elements, and the jury believed Ronnie about stolen property and that kind of stuff, and basically decided there wasn't enough to back up the drug deal. Now, there were convictions in Boston not involving Merino in the same drug case, but in terms of what happened in Philadelphia, there was a not guilty, and I don't think nobody's saying otherwise. I don't know. You know, you can whine and complain about it, but that's the reality of what it was.
Yeah, and the bottom line, they just didn't have enough evidence in the drug case in Boston to prove the case because they had a wiretap conversation with Ron Previty, Joey Merlino, and Bobby Luisi, who was the head of the Boston faction of the Philly mob up there, and Joey never spoke about drugs in that conversation. Yeah. He intimated about something going on, but the something was what? His side, from the defense side, was we could have been talking about anything. We could have been talking about bologna sandwiches. There was no mention of drugs. Yeah, frozen shrimp. Yeah.
Frozen shrimp. I mean, Eddie Jacobs was masterful in that and kept coming back to that. That's why Eddie is who he is, such a good defense attorney, because he takes the government's tapes, takes the government's evidence, and turns it around on them. And that's what happened here. And so, you know, I mean, this was, if you remember, after the convictions in that case, Eddie was saying, well, they got him on racketeering light. And to a degree, that's true. I mean, they didn't get any of the murder charges and they didn't get the drug charge. But Joey still got 14 years. I wouldn't call that anything light.
No, I wouldn't either. George Borghese got 13 years. A bunch of the other guys got 9, 8, 7. Angelo Lutz got 7 years in prison. He's a cook, not a crook. Right. If you listen to him in Mob War, that's what he talked about. So, I mean, there were significant sentences. And I also want to point out that at the end of each of the 3 parts, there is a slate that comes up that says specifically that Joey was not convicted of any violence. He was not convicted of the drug charges, and nobody's saying he was.
Yeah. I don't know what more needs to be said. It is what it is. I mean, what the problem with any documentary is people see what they want to see, people hear what they want to hear. And depending on if you talk to a law enforcement guy who watched this or you talk to another world guy who watched this, they're going to come away with different perceptions. That's human nature. Okay.
George, back to the Perna case. Can you make a prediction here? Or is it too early on how you think this turns out?
I think it's too early. I think the only thing I think we could say with some kind of certainty is you've got, 40, if you add up the numbers now, 40 or 50 people I would say at least half, maybe two-thirds of those people will end up pleading out to a lesser charge. And if we do get trials, it'll be 4 or 5 guys at best.
Yeah, maybe 4 guys from the first case
Right.
and Joe Perna with this case, if they go to trial. And they would be separate trials because they're not joint cases unless there's a superseding indictment that makes it so. But we haven't heard anything about that.
No, I don't see it going that way. But
All right,
I
George.
think that's what's going to happen.
My friend, have a great Thanksgiving. Appreciate
Good
that.
to
Thank
see
you for your time again. Folks, that's it for this week. We'll see you again next time. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. For Philly Prime Podcast and Mob Talk Sit Down, we'll see you next time.